Okay, so we are continuing our discussion of the Amidah, and I know it's been a couple of weeks since we got together, and actually, I'll remind you of this both at the end of the session and also in my email. We will not meet next week because it is Erev Tisha B'Av, the evening of Tisha B'Av. So I'm going to go to the. So I'm going to review a little bit. I'm going to go through this quickly, simply on where the Amidah fits in the service. So particularly in a morning service, you have the morning blessings, and you have a lot of verses. So the rabbis, I always sort of say they never took anything away from a service, except reform. Actually, as we'll see, the reform movement did remove things from the service, but traditionally the rabbis added more and more. So you have verses of song, and then you have the Shema and its blessings, and then the Amidah, which is what we're going to talk about. And yeah, this is from Hoffman's book. I think I showed you this book last time. There's a very nice series called My People's Prayer Book, and there's a section on the Amidah, and so that's where this chart is from. So the Shema is really about creed. The Amidah is really about asking God for things, silent prayer, and then if it's a Shabbat, a Monday, or a Thursday, or a holiday, we'll have a Torah service, and then concluding prayers. And then again, I'm not going to go over this in any great detail, but the Amidah structure, particularly on weekdays, is an introductory verse, first three blessings, the patriarchs, which in Hebrew is the Avot, and in Reform, since we give women equal time, Avot and Imahot, and then God's might, Givurot, and then the holiness of God's name, and then on Shabbat, we then and then on weekdays, and I think we'll be talking about this next time. We'll be talking about the intermediate blessings where we ask for things. And on Shabbat, we also then substitute, we take all of this out and we substitute one prayer, which we'll see today, which is the holiness of the day. And then the last three prayers we also say on Shabbat, a prayer about worship, which Reform movement changed dramatically. And instead of asking for the return of the sacrificial service, we are really talking about our own worship, thanksgiving, and peace. And then it's kind of silent prayer. And then I mentioned, well, I just gave a little note that typically in Mishkan Tefillah, our prayer book, on the right-hand page, we will have the Hebrew, a transliteration, and then a gender-neutral translation. And on the left page, we will be talking that the prayer book gives us some readings along the same theme as the Hebrew. Typically, what I'm doing here, particularly when I'm copying from Mishkan Tefillah, and everything I'm copying today is all from Mishkan Tefillah. I'm really focusing on this side of the page, the Hebrew, the transliteration, and the translation. And we talked about this last time, the opening, the Tefillah, and there is a tradition, and I know this is kind of small, of taking 3 steps forward. We typically don't do this a lot because we're in a pew. As I think most of you know, that when we recite at the end of the Amidah, Osei Shalom Bimromav, there's a tradition of taking 3 steps backward. And the idea of what's going on here is it's as though we are at this point approaching God, approaching God's throne. So we take some steps to approach God. And then at the end of the prayer, we take some steps to back away from God's throne. And then our prayer book does a good job of telling us where these phrases come from. So Adonai Sifatai Tiftachu Fi Yagita Hilatecha comes from a psalm, and it's psalm. The phrase is in Psalm 51:17, and then I'm always adding notes, typically from things I've gotten from my various books, and so I'm not going to go over what we did last time. Okay, so we're now caught up, and so what we are going to discuss is the Avot and Imahot. And I'm actually not quite sure how to do this. I don't think I'm going to chant the Hebrew. but we know the Hebrew so well. Maybe I will chant it, but I'm going to chant it with the Shabbat melody. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol v'Zocher Hazdei Avot v'Imahot U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem L'man Shemo Be'ahava. And we go down here. Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Abraham V'Ezrat Sarah. And yeah, so actually one of the interesting things is, for those of you that have been praying for a while, you may note even after we included the matriarchs, we would say Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka. We used to say Elohei Rachel, we used to say Elohei Leah, Elohei Rachel. So there's actually, when they did this prayer book, there was a controversy about whether to put Rachel first or Leah first.
Well, she was
Leah first.
Wife.
And there's not many places in the Talmud where the matriarchs are listed. But in most of the places where they are listed in order, Rachel is listed before Leah, even though Jacob was married to Leah a week before he was married to Rachel. And then I remember when this first came out, somebody noticed, and I always think about it every time I pray this, is that the word after Leah is Ha'el, and Ha'el backwards is Leah. So there's a nice little bit of symmetry there in the Hebrew, if you know what I'm talking about.
Rabbi, you mentioned that he married her a week after. I thought for another 7 years he had to work for Laban.
No. So he thinks he's marrying Rachel.
Yes.
Rachel.
But he marries
Next
Leah.
morning in bed, it's Leah. So after the 7-day celebration of that wedding, he marries her after 7 days, but he has to work for another 7 years for Lavan, his father-in-law, to pay the bride price. So it's only 7 days. You can check on that, but I'm sure of that. Bryce.
Yeah, I wanted to, the melody you were singing, is that in accordance with the vowels underneath it, or is that simply a customary melody? I've heard it a million times, but
yeah.
wondering where it comes
yes. It's a very good question. It is a customary melody. The vowels don't give any musical notation. So I wish I could easily. No, I can't. I can easily.
Only the Pentateuch is that.
So hold on a second. So this text does not have any trope. Trope, when you read Bible, you will always see, in addition to vowels, under and sometimes over the letters, you will see other marks which are trope, which have grammatical value, and they and then in different traditions they have different musical value. So same trope, read Reform will have a different musical tone than Chabad, will have a different musical tone than Casablanca, Morocco.
Okay.
Now, the one thing I'll point out for those of you who, a little more Hebrew, so here's a word, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. Everybody see the word Eloheinu?
Yep.
Is that the last one in the line?
Yes, I'm circling it now.
Eloheinu. Right.
So you might think that we should be saying Eloheinu, because quite often the last syllable is accented. So when it goes against that general rule, you see the little line there under the A? That tells you where to accent. So and you'll see that a lot. So it's Yitzchak, last syllable accented. Avraham, last syllable accented. Let's see if there's another one in there.
I don't see what I'm looking at. I just see the Hebrew letters without anything that gives me.
You see the Hebrew letters without any what?
No, you're saying there's some kind of emphasis for the.
So, let me see if I can.
It's the vowel is the accent.
Magnify slide. Let me see what happens if I do this. Oh, cool. I never knew I could do that. Okay. Do you all see the slide now magnified?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So there is Eloheinu. You see it?
Yes.
So under the hey, there's two dots, which is the vowel A, and there's
Yeah.
also a little vertical line.
Okay.
You see that, Alan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought, and they bring it up, since there's no trope here, I always thought that was part of the cantillation in the.
No, it's not. And that's actually exactly what Bryce asked. It's when typically we accent the last syllable. Baruch, Atah, Yaakov, Rivka, bigger words, Imahot. But where we don't, so here is Avotenu. There's another little line there. Imotenu. There's another little line there.
Okay.
You see? And Moshiach. Moshiach. You see the line there?
So the two little vertical dots mean you accent there.
No, not. They are actually not vertical dots. They're a vertical small line.
It's a line because it looks broken. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
now
And
this is
Lama'an,
everybody.
Right.
there's one Lama'an. Now the question is, how do I get out of? Oh, that was easy. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
This is not different from or traditional and reform, and it's not different between Ashkenazi and Sephardic, this particular treatment.
Sephardic pronunciation differs from Ashkenazi pronunciation, and I take a quick look. Well, I'm looking at an Orthodox prayer book in a different section, the Aleinu, and there's also that vertical line, Aleinu l'shabech. Well, even actually there, yeah. So the practice of putting a line in is where the editors are helping you with where to put an accent on the syllable if it doesn't follow standard approach.
Okay.
I don't know if that's clear.
So quick question then to follow up. The reason it doesn't have trope is because this is a psalm.
No, it doesn't have trope because this is rabbinic. The trope is only in biblical material. So
Okay.
Hebrew Bible, Torah,
Okay.
39 books of the Hebrew Bible. So you
All right.
won't find trope in Mishnah. You won't find trope
Okay.
in Talmud. I don't know. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true. I mean,
Sounds like a project for somebody.
Because it's not chanted. Whenever it's chanted, then you
yeah.
have.
So that was the question Bryce asked. We're chanting this, and the chant I just gave you is sort of a. There is a. If Cantor Shukar were with us, he would tell us the musician who did that, who created that chant. And so just for the fun of it, so the chant I just gave you the Shabbat chant. So I think a weekday chant would be more like this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov, and so on. So on the weekdays, you would have a different chant than on Shabbat, and then on I think you may know on the high holidays,
Different.
like for Rosh Hashanah, it's there's a different melody, but the text is the same. So you have different traditions. It's called the general term for melodies for prayers is called nusach. And one of the reasons cantors have a 5-year program of study, just like rabbis, is they are learning the nusach for these various things. That's yeah, very good questions. So on the next page, I have the same prayer, and I'll just note here. Oh, I didn't know I could. How do I do this? Magnify slide. This is so exciting to me. Oh, okay. So so here you have an insert. It says Shabbat Shuvah, right? And Shabbat Shuvah are this is a Shabbat prayer book. So anytime you would be reciting this prayer, the Avot and Imahot, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you have an additional insert, which is remember us for life, O sovereign who delights in life. and inscribe us in the book of life for your sake, living God. So you can see this is clearly a high holiday insert.
Mhm.
And again, I'm not good at nusach, but it's something like Zochreinu lechaim melech hafetz b'chaim v'katvenu b'sefer chachayim l'mancha Elohim chayim. And then we go back to the regular prayer. And this is very common in actually all of our liturgy. You will see prayer, things to add, things to subtract on different holidays.
It shortens the prayer book. Can you imagine if every prayer had to be written out completely, depending, without regard to the holiday? You would have a different one incomplete written. This way you can just assemble it out of pieces.
Yeah, so this prayer book basically just says on Shabbat Shuvah, I think I have, so these are the notes at the bottom of our prayer book. So it says Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The reason we're only talking about Shabbat Shuvah is this prayer book is a Shabbat prayer book. And then it will say, it'll give you some stage directions. So for those who choose, so Reform Movement, we're not forcing you into the choreography. So for those who choose, at the beginning and the end of the blessing, one bends the knees and bows from the waist at the word Baruch and stands up at the word Adonai. So it's Baruch Atah Adonai, like that. And most congregations will do the same exact thing on the next prayer, but you shouldn't. It's kind of
customs.
Okay. And then it's, a little commentary from actually a teacher I've studied with, Judith Abrams. The content of this prayer has to do with the merit of our ancestors. This is traditionally conceived as sort of a bank account into which the patriarchs and matriarchs deposited funds of righteousness that was so great they covered all future generations. The concept that's called Zechut Avot. And so we're opening by praising God and our ancestors, with the hope that if we don't really deserve all the good stuff, maybe God will give it to us because we have great ancestors. There's a phrase in Yiddish called yeches. Bryce, I don't know if your hand is raised from before or you have something.
No, I just put it back up. I just had a question. Yeah, no, and the question is, with an infinite bank account that you can never spend down, doesn't that make somebody a little more profligate with their unrighteousness and
I would say
less?
This is a poetic image. Don't take it too literally.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, so there it is, invoking the merits of the ancestors. And Henry, you will be delighted to know that converts also recite this prayer as spiritual children. Mentioning the names highlight how personal the prayer is. So you get credit for all those ancestors, even though you just recently adopted them. Let's see. And then I think most of you know, many of you know, that traditionally it was Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, and then Ha'el Hagadol, and so on. So actually, the Reconstructionist movement started this practice of adding the women, the matriarchs, and in many areas when the Reconstructionist movement had a good idea, we stole it from them not too long after they started it. And I'll add one other little bit of trivia. There is a real controversy about whether to put the, whoops, not sure where that one's coming from. I think it's Jay. Okay. So there's a real controversy about whether to use this word imotenu, because the word avotenu can mean fathers, but it can also mean parents. In Hebrew is a gendered language, and plural masculine covers both masculine and feminine. So Yeled is
still
male.
I can handle it.
Well, hold on, Jay. Yeled is male. Yalda is male, a boy. Yalda is female, a girl. Yeladim, let me put it this way, Yaldot are a group of girls, and Yeladim can either be a group of boys or a mixed group of boys and girls. So there was real controversy whether you need this word imotenu. or whether the word avotenu really means parents. And then I would say in the gender neutral world, there was little controversy about whether to mention the women. I don't know, Jay, if Jay looks like he's on the phone. So Alan, yeah, go ahead.
But there is a different Hebrew word for the word parent, right? So the implication that the avots are,
Yeah, you're
both
talking about
genders, but there is a different word.
There's one horim.
Yeah,
But
that one.
I don't know if that word would apply to patriarchs and matriarchs. My Hebrew isn't good enough to know, but I can tell you there was a controversy about whether or not to include the word
Well,
imotenu.
it would have been harder, in my opinion, coming from if they were trying to modernize and they took out vote totally with the parent word, then they've lost. I think this make more sense to have a vote in imot, then you haven't lost a vote and replaced it with something totally unfamiliar to most people.
Yes, if they would have said Elohei Hahorim,
yeah,
that would have been odd. And it actually points out a pretty important idea, which we'll actually see in the next in the Givurot. Even when the Reform movement changes the Hebrew, clearly we change the English lots of times. But even when we change the Hebrew, there's an attempt to keep the Hebrew similar to the original and only make subtle changes. We'll actually see that in I think in more detail in the next one. So for example, the question is, what do we use for Adonai? If you go back to older translations, it would be, blessed are you, Lord our God. But Lord clearly is masculine. In this prayer book, they just say Adonai our God. They basically cop out. We're not going to translate it at all. Literally, you figure it out. Other prayer books will say the eternal our God, which isn't a bad translation of Yud Hey Vav Hey. But anyway, the translator's dilemma is endless as to what decisions to make. Okay, let's see where we are. And then so here we say Mevi Geula. Actually, you know what? I mean it's worth just looking at the translation. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, God of our fathers and mothers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God of Sarah, God of Rebekah, God of Rachel, God of Leah, the great, mighty, awesome God, transcendent God who bestows loving kindness, creates everything out of love, remembers the love of our fathers and mothers, and brings redemption to their children's children for the sake of the divine name. We read the Shabbat Tshuva insert. Sovereign, deliverer, helper, and shield. Blessed are you, Adonai, Sarah's helper, Abraham's shield. So one thing is kind of interesting. In a traditional version of this prayer, it would say, instead of Mevi Geula, it would say Mevi Goel. Instead of bringing redemption, it would say brings a redeemer. And they're talking about the Messiah. So in the Reform approach to liturgy, we get away from the concept of an individual Messiah and talk about a messianic age, messianic redemption. So that's the way you would change it. But again, many people won't even notice the difference. Mevi Geula, Mevi Goel. It's very similar. Let me see if there's another. Okay, I'm going to go back and call on. Hold on, let me call on Jay. You have your hand up, and I muted you while you were chatting offline. So you need to unmute. Jay, do you have something to say? Okay, while Jay is figuring that out, I'll call on Bryce.
Yeah, so what I wanted to ask you is, would you say that any attempt at a translation necessarily affects and distorts, and I don't mean badly, but you can't help it, the meaning to a degree?
Yes. I would say all translation is interpretation. And I think anybody that speaks other languages knows this, that if you try and translate from one language to another, there's idioms if you translate them literally, and Hebrew is exceptionally I would say, ambiguous. So there's a lot of opportunity for debate about what the translation should be. Alan and Jay, if you want to say something, you need to unmute. Alan, go ahead.
The pronunciation of the word that ale that had to do with the Messiah versus the Messiah.
Goel, yeah, and rather
Yeah,
than,
is that, and you explained what we do in Reform, is conservative and Orthodox the other way?
yes. Orthodox certainly, I believe conservative also is Goel. I'd have to check my conservative prayer book. And then in some cases, they will give you options. Like in the conservative prayer book, they will give you options whether to include the matriarchs along with the patriarchs. Jay, you're muted.
They never have the matriarchs.
I think
The newer conservative synagogues do give that option. Yeah.
I don't think Jay is having any luck in trying to unmute.
yeah.
Keep it going.
Okay,
Can you
there
hear
you
me
go.
now?
There he
Yes,
goes.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
can
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
remove reform brings redemption?
Say that again.
Can you remove reform brings redemption?
Yes.
Okay. Remember us for life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. In the
We don't remember the dead.
no, it's a good question. Let me magnify the slide. I'm so excited about magnifying the line. Okay, remember us alive. It's Zochrenu L'chaim. So it's basically what this is on the high holidays, and God is deciding whether we're going to be inscribed in the book of life or not, right? So we're asking God to remember us for living.
So
Mel-
tell me
Melech
what this
Hafetz
book of
B'chaim.
life is.
I'm sorry.
Where is this book of life?
Where?
Yes.
So that's
Never
what
heard
it's
of the book of
called.
life in
No.
It's the
Sefer
year.
Chaim in high holidays?
It's called that for.
Hold on a second, Jerry. Let me, you in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we're always talking about being inscribed for a good year in the book of life.
Okay.
L'shana
Okay. Yeah.
L'shana Tova
Now,
Tikateva.
is there such a thing as a book of life?
The tradition teaches, I'm choosing my words very carefully, that we are judged on the high holidays, and we are judged whether to be inscribed for a good year in the book of life or a bad year in the book of life.
Right.
It is poetic imagery. You can call it, I know you like the
Okay.
word mythology.
Okay.
So I don't take it literally at all.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. That explains that to
You're
me.
welcome. Bryce.
I'm sorry. I can no
Okay.
longer remember what I had.
Okay, well,
what I'd asked.
okay. So let's see. Okay, so we talked about this. All right, so now we're going to talk about the Givurot. And I'll do the same thing. I'll just chant it. Tagi, and this is the Shabbat melody. Tagi bor leolam maronai mechayeha kolata rav lehoshia mori hatal mechalkel chaim bechesed mechayeha kol berachamim rabim somech noflim v'rofei cholim umatir asurim umekayem emunato lishenei afar micha mocha ba'al givurot umido melach melech mimit umechaye umatzmiach Yeshua v'ne'eman ata l'chayot hakol baruch ata Adonai mechaye hakol.
Amen, team.
Okay, so actually let me back up. So yeah, so here the Reform movement always substituted hakol rather than metim. Actually, I should go to the next slide to show you the translation, because it says, Atagi bor leolam Adonai, you are forever mighty Adonai, mechaye hakol, you give life to everything, or the tradition is not mechaye hakol, it's mechaye hametim. So if you think about the most powerful thing of God's power that the rabbis could imagine, it was physical resurrection of the dead. So as we're praising God's power, that's what they're going to focus on. and Rob Lahoshia, great is your saving power. It's interesting. They didn't translate that at all. Yeah, I can't. And then, let's see, Cheryl's coming back. I'll just kind of go through the translation and then we can discuss it.
What's the, sorry, Rabbi, what's
Yeah.
the translation of the word Givurot? Where is that connected to the texts? It's in a
Atah
singular
Gibor.
way. It looks like a singular right there. Yeah, but
Yes. So Givurot is powers.
powers.
So,
Okay.
so they're going to talk here. I actually think I have a, well, yeah, so let's see if I have it. Yeah, so it's going to discuss God's might in nature, life, weather, healing, freedom, deliverance. So
Okay.
Gibor is power, and
Singular.
Givurot are powers. So
Thank you.
it's the name of the prayer.
Thank you.
The other thing which is kind of interesting here is that I think you may notice this. This is traditional, and Reform added it with this prayer book, maybe the one before it, I'm not sure, that we say different prayers in the winter than in the summer. In the winter, we say you cause the wind to shift and rain to fall. So we're actually praying for rain and acknowledging rain in the rainy season, which is, we're talking about the rainy season in Israel, which is also the rainy season in Southern California. And in the summer, we just say Morid Hatal. We're not expecting rain. You cause the dew to fall. Yeah, Alan.
Isn't the calendar part is connected to the two holidays?
Yeah, so if you
Sukkot and Pesach, it's not literally about. I mean, it is based on. Well,
yeah.
Based
So
on
the
Israel.
winter
Yeah,
is
right.
from Shmini Atzeret, which is the last day of Sukkot. Shmini Atzeret, which is Simchas Torah, to Pesach. So the winter is right after Sukkot. Why after Sukkot? Because we don't want it to rain on us while we're living in the sukkah. To Passover, it can rain. And at Passover, we want it to stop raining because we're going to go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And the summer period is the last day of Passover to Shmini Atzeret. I assume you're following up on that, Alan. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to clarify because I know this is a calendar Jewish holiday thing, but in the Southern Hemisphere, the weather is different.
In New York City, the weather is different.
Well, but the principle
in the Holy Land of Brooklyn, the weather is different.
Well, the Holy Land is the real Holy Land is the governing criteria for thinking about this. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
In Argentina, they think of this transition in the context of Israel, and they may use the word winter, but it's not winter at that time of the year.
We don't use the word winter. I mean, you see the word winter, and I agree with you that you see it, but in the prayer book, well, actually.
Okay, good point. Yeah, what's in the prayer book? Thank you.
I actually, I'd have to look at Art Scroll. I was actually criticized one of the comments on one of these. Yeah, so I'm not going to do it. I was criticized that I'm looking things up while we're talking. But I don't know what they use.
I have Art Scroll in front of me, but
so you can find it. Jay, you have your hand up.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. I'll put it down. You don't have to do a thing. Okay. So basically, God's power now. You sustain life through love. Mechachel chayim b'chesed. Mechaye hakol. You give life to everything or to the dead, reviving the dead. Barachamim rabim, through great compassion. Pretty good translation. Supporting the fallen, healing the sick, freeing the captive, keeping faith with those who sleep in the dust. So actually, Jay, that answers one of your comments that we are remembering people who are dead. Michamocha, who is like you, source of mighty acts. Let's see how they translate. Baal Givurim. Yeah, Baal Givurim is actually the Michamocha Baal HaGivurot. Who is like you, the master of powers. I would translate that literally. A source of mighty acts is a pretty good translation. Who resembles you, sovereign, who takes and gives life, causing deliverance to spring up and faithfully give life to all, also reviving who is dead, and then who is like you on on high holidays, compassionate God, who mercifully remembers your creatures for life, and then a lot of blessings have, and we'll see this throughout the Amidah. At the end of every section of the Amidah, there is something called a chatima. Chatima is the word for the seal, and it sums up the whole prayer with a word. So it's Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayeh Hakol, or Mechayeh Hametim. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives life to all, or who revives the dead. I'll back up one here.
You also
If we
say,
go ba- if we go back to the, hold on a second, go back to the Avot and Imahot, it's Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Be'ezrat Sarah. So, blessed are you, Adonai, the shield of Abraham, and then since we added the matriarchs, the one who helps Sarah. Okay. See if there's anything else I wanted to add there. Yeah, so these are all the places where, in reviving the dead, where in traditional Reformed prayer books up until this version, you wouldn't even see Mechayeh HaMetim. And so what I've heard, and I don't know what the official Reformed position on this is, when we say Mechayeh HaMetim, God who basically gives life to the dead, I've heard it discussed as God gives life to people who are spiritually dead. So you can interpret that phrase as literal physical resurrection, or giving life to people who are spiritually dead. A hallmark of the rabbis, of the Pharisees, was a belief in physical resurrection. And I have no doubt that the rabbis who wrote this prayer were talking about physical resurrection. Alan.
So the Heart Scroll skips the seasonal thing, and it says it by the Jewish holidays. Between Shmini Atzeret and Pesach, add these verses.
Okay.
Okay.
But so you don't have to ask where it's winter and where it's summer.
Right.
It is, so central is the land of Israel to Judaism that we pray for rain in the rainy season of Israel, no matter where we live. It's kind of interesting. Okay. Yeah, so that's this question of when we should pray for rain. Okay. So then the next section of this is the Kedusha, which means holiness. And it's really talking about the holiness of God. So just do it a little quickly. Nikadesh et shimcha ba'olam keshem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom kakatuv al yad niviecha v'kara ze'el ze ve'amar kadosh 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 Adonai tzevaot Melo chol haaretz kevodo. Adir adirenu Adonai Adonenu ma'adir shimcha b'chol haaretz. Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. Echadu Eloheinu hu avinu hu malkeinu hu moshienu v'hu yashmienu v'rachamav le'enei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Yixion, ledor vador, Hallelujah. Ledor vador nagid God lecha, ulenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush, leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Rabbi Michael,
Thank you. I think
you definitely have improved your vocal.
I have done this more than a few times since
Uh,
we got started, Jerry.
But you
One
carry
interesting thing
through
that
now.
I'll just point out, that this is a prayer traditionally led by a prayer leader, but the entire congregation responds in these inserted areas, Kadosh, 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 Baruch Kevod Adonai Memchamo, Yimlo, and so on. Jerry, you have your hand up.
Yes, I did. You were talking about Hatima. In high holidays, we wish each other a Gamar Hatima Tova.
Yes, because we say in Gemar Chatima, in the end, may you be sealed for a good year, or for good. So the word chatima is the same.
Oh.
Yep. Cheryl.
I'm used to when we do ze, I turn left, I turn right.
We're gonna,
And
yes.
and then kadosh, 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 I go up on my toes.
Yeah, I'm gonna get there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So here it is with the translation. Let's see what I have here. So for those who choose, again, we're so gentle in the Reform movement, we're not going to force you to do anything. At the words kara zeh, so it's v'kara zeh el zeh ve'amar, one bows left, and at el zeh, one bows to the right, and on each mention of kadosh, you rise up on your toes. So why are we doing this? Because we're actually quoting, I think I have this mentioned here. Well, let's see. Yeah, this is from Isaiah 6:3. And in Isaiah 6:3, the prophet has the image of seraphim, which are kind of fiery angelic creatures calling to one another, saying kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. So we say, as is written by a prophet, that's a loose translation. This is kakatuv al zeh. No, okay, kakatuv al zeh neviyacha, as is written by a prophet. V'kara zeh el zeh ve'amor. Oh, it's so interesting how they just skip stuff. So kara zeh el zeh ve'amor, it says they call one to the other and say, but they just sort of skip that part. So when we're standing, we say v'kara zeh el zeh ve'amor. We're imitating these seraphim that are calling to one another with these words. And on each kadosh, we go up on our toes. And I've seen a bunch of explanations for that. The one I always talk about is we want to get up there with the seraphim praising God. And then I came across this in some of my reading, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. It's repeated 3 times. So one of the commentaries is God is holy in heaven, God is holy on earth, and God is holy in time. Jerry, I don't know if your hand is still up from before or you have something else. Okay, I'll take that. And okay, so I mean, it's just kind of interesting. Of course, the threefold repetition of holy, 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 you can certainly guess what it would mean for Christians. It would mean holy is the Father, holy is the Son, holy is the Spirit. And I don't know if any of you have been in Prague, and the Charles Bridge has these beautiful statues, and this one is there, and there's a blow up. Oh, I can actually blow it up further. I am so excited about magnifying slide. I can't tell you. So, so here, this is on the Charles Bridge,
Right,
and it's in Hebrew. I guess the interesting thing is it's of course a crucifix. It's Jesus on the cross with the words, you know, Jesus, King of the Jews, with the initials in Latin. But it's Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivaot. And, you know, I remember the first time I saw this, I think many of you know my son lives in Prague. And so I've been to Prague, you know, easily 6 or more times. And I came across it, you know, finding a cross and a crucifix didn't surprise me. Finding Hebrew really surprised me. And I don't know a lot about the history of this particular statue, but it is interesting that it is in Hebrew. So the Jewish understanding of this is the angels, these seraphim, recite holy 3 times, referring to the 3 worlds: the upper world, where God is; the intermediate world, in between us and God; and the lower world, where we hang out. Okay, so that Kedusha is the morning Kedusha. In the evening, like at a Friday night service, we would just say or sing, Ata Kadosh v'Shimcha Kadosh u'Kodoshim b'chol yom yecha'alucha Selah. Baruch Ata Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. And then on Shabbat Shuvah, we say Baruch Ata Adonai HaMelech HaKadosh. So on every service except for the 10 days between, including Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we say the Holy God. There's a translation. On the on the high holidays, we say the Holy King, HaMelech HaKadosh. Here, loosely translated, the Holy Sovereign, because they don't want to get gendered. Bryce.
So when you're talking about, I think a previous page, you were talking about the three worlds, the upper, intermediate, and lower. And you say that we are on the lower?
Yes.
Yeah, I think this reference refers. Actually, in Kabbalah. There's a lot of discussion of the four worlds, and I'm not sure specifically what the three worlds mean, but that's how they understand the threefold repetition. Although the threefold repetition is in Isaiah, so I guess they're wondering why the seraphim are repeating it 3 times, and I don't know more about it than that.
Well, I was just pleased that they don't have an even lower world for people to go through.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. I like that too. Okay, so on an afternoon and evening, I always forget what you do in the afternoon, but certainly in the evening, instead of that very long Kedusha, you just say, "You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God." And then at the end of Selah, we see Selah a lot in the Psalms, and Selah can be just people speculate that it may be almost a musician's notation at the end of a section of a psalm or something, but apparently it can also mean forever, according to one of the scholars. Okay, so we have a little more time. So then, whereas on a weekday we would go into, I think, 12 or 13 individual blessings where we ask God for stuff. On Shabbat, we pretend that we're living in the world redeemed. We don't need any stuff. So instead of those intermediate blessings, we say one blessing, which is the Kedushat Hayom, referring to Shabbat. And in our prayer book, which certainly differs quite a bit from a traditional prayer book, the traditional prayer book has a lot more liturgy than what we have. They tell you to either select Yisbachu or Vashamru. So I'm not going to sing Yismachu. That's just a lot of repetition. But basically, Yismachu is those who keep the Sabbath by calling it a delight shall rejoice in your realm. It's really your kingdom. I'll get into some of the words. The people that hallow Shabbat will delight in your goodness, for being pleased with the 7th day you hallowed it as the most precious of days, drawing our attention to the work of creation. And our prayer book notes, Yismachu contains 24 Hebrew words said to correspond to the 24 hours of Shabbat. Interesting idea. And the other interesting thing was, as I was searching through a traditional prayer book, Yismachu is not in the traditional morning service. It's in the Musaf service. On Shabbat and holidays, you not only have a regular morning service, but there's an additional service called Musaf. And the main thing in the additional service is a repetition of the Amidah. So it's Yismachu instead of Vashamru Yismachu is in the Musaf service. And quite often I point out that you know more Hebrew than you think you know. So, and I do this with Yismachu. So Yismachu, so excited about magnifying slides. Okay, so Yismachu is in the middle of Yismachu. Now this is a Hebrew lesson. You have Sin, Mem, Chet. If you didn't have any vowels there, you would recognize that as the word Sameach, which means happy. The Yud in the beginning indicates future tense, and the Vav at the end is plural. So Yismachu, future third person plural. They will be happy. I don't know if I can do this. No, I have to get out of it. But Malachutecha, again, same sort of thing. In this word Malachutecha, you see Mem Lamed Chaf, which is the word melech, which means king, right? Everybody recognize melech? You know that word. Be means in or with, king. Malchut is kingship or kingdom, and the cha on the end is your. So the translation is, they're translating is, you'll rejoice, will rejoice in your realm. And I'll just go maybe a little quicker now. You have the phrase Shomrei Shabbat. Some of you may know the word Shomer Shabbat. One who is Shomer Shabbat is one who keeps the Sabbath. The word Shomer literally means to guard. And Shomrei Shabbat is plural, those who keep Shabbat. Like just go through the rest of this. But Koreh, it's the same, it's one who proclaims. And we know it probably best from the word Quran, which is an Arabic word, because the Quran is understood as something that the prophet Gabriel proclaimed to Muhammad. But the one who reads Torah is sometimes called a Baal Koreh, the one who is the master of proclaiming, namely Torah. And the Koreh Oneg, one who calls it Oneg. The word Oneg means delight. I often reflect that. Oneg Shabbat, what do we find delightful about Shabbat? It's the dessert afterwards. Okay, let me back up. Alan.
In the first line, when you explained that the last letter of the Malchut,
Yep.
you use the second person word you. Is it interpreted to be singular?
Oh, it's definitely singular.
It's not all people. It's not directed to everybody.
Oh, it's directed to God. Yismachu, they will rejoice in your kingdom. Whose kingdom? God's kingdom.
Well, you isn't the people. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, if it was plural, it would be malachut techem. That would be the plural, if I wanted to make that word plural.
Thanks.
Good question. Okay. And then the other option, Jake, yes.
Yeah. This probably is one of my favorite parts of the service.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me who wrote it?
No, who wrote the prayer or who wrote the music?
Who wrote? Well, somebody who wrote the prayer had to write the music.
Yeah, the word. Oh, well, the words. So the words appear in prayer books, and so and I don't know specifically whether this prayer is literally in the Talmud, but it's Talmudic. So we're talking about the rabbis, around the year 500 of the Common Era. Basically, none of this is in Torah, none of this is in Bible. This is the rabbis' answer to the question, what do we do now that we no longer have a temple to sacrifice animals at? Their answer is, we're going to pray 3 times a day instead of sacrificing 3 times a day. What are we going to pray? We'll let you know. Here's what we're going to pray. And
so
the
rabbis wrote this service.
Yes.
The rabbis wrote this Amidah.
Yes. It's rabbinic.
Okay.
Yes. Whenever you see the words Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, you know it's rabbinic. Yeah, it's not
really?
Bible. Yes. The words Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam do not appear in the Bible.
Okay.
And again, underline.
Thank you.
I can't say this enough. It's so important. Underlining the idea that what we practice is rabbinic Judaism, not biblical Judaism. That's something we can't say often enough. And we'll do the Kedushat Hayom. So this is the other one, and this is in the morning prayer. So it's Vashamru. So the people of Israel shall keep the Shabbat, observing Shabbat throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It is a sign for me, between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth. On the 7th day God ceased from work and was refreshed. And this is actually right out of the book of Exodus. You notice you don't see the word Baruch Atah Adonai in there anywhere. and I think I have a few little things. So this is in the traditional Shabbat morning service. And we say Oti Leolam Va'ed, Oti Leolam, which Ot is a sign. She is a sign. Ot is a feminine word. Leolam, forever. What is a sign of? Berit Olam. Berit means covenant. Olam means eternal. We often talk about a bris, but that's just the Ashkenazi way of pronouncing Brit. The word Brit means covenant. So Shabbat is the sign of the covenant. I know one scholar who said the reason we don't wear tefillin on Shabbat is the tefillin are a sign, and on Shabbat we don't need that additional sign because Shabbat itself is a sign. And the same teacher, Judith Abrams, who is a Talmudic scholar, she would wear very feminine tefillin even on Shabbat, but she said the two signs of the covenant are the Brit Milah, circumcision, and Shabbat, and on Shabbat and on weekdays it's tefillin. Women don't have the covenant of circumcision, so women should be able to wear tefillin both on Shabbat and on weekdays. Alan.
You said something that, of course, got my attention when you described her feminine tefillin. What do you mean by what does she do?
Oh, they were pretty.
mean,
They were instead of
okay.
a very masculine. Maybe it's prejudicial of me to say a black box with leather straps is masculine, but this what looked like a little pillow with the scrolls were inserted inside, and it was a beautifully colored ribbon that she used to attach her. So it was definitely feminine. Jay, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to mention, or you just
I'll lower it.
and let's see. So
Quick question, Rabbi.
yeah, let me make one more point, and I'll take your question. It says on the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed. So one of the things clearly going on is the reason for Shabbat is, I think in Latin it's called imitatio Dei. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Imitation of God. So just as God rested on Shabbat, and you can raise the question, why did God need to rest? Very good question. Don't know the answer. God knows. But that's the impetus for us resting as well. Yeah, Bryce.
Well, that was essentially my question. The implication is that God gets tired. And
well, the interesting, yeah. So yes.
I mean, it's hard. It's hard. You don't need to be refreshed if you're not tired. I mean, that's
that's a very interesting question. So now my world is going to be filled with magnifying slides. It says V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat, which can mean rest or cease from work or even sit. You've heard of the word yeshiva? Everybody hear the word yeshiva?
Yeah.
Yeshiva is a study hall. It's where people sit down to study. So the way you would say, you would ask someone sit down, you would say, leshevet, sit down. So Shabbat can mean sit down, it can mean rest. Yinafash, you see the word nefesh. Everybody see the word nefesh, which means, in biblical Hebrew means life, but in rabbinic Hebrew, and we're in the rabbinic Hebrew world, it can mean spirit. So the question is, do you have to be tired to be inspirited, refreshed, inspired? I could say, Yinafash can mean inspired. So clearly, God is doing something with Shabbat. It's the only thing in the Bible that, it's the only thing in creation that is described as being holy. It's only until we get to Exodus and the building of the temple that we have a place that's holy. But until that point, the only thing that's holy in biblical Hebrew is Shabbat. So God is creating holiness in time, and it's a place for inspiration. And maybe God didn't need to be inspired one day a week, but God is teaching us that we need to be refreshed, inspired, rest, and so on. And I have to tell you, for rabbis, Shabbat isn't exactly a day of rest. Okay, we are working hard on Shabbat, but we're not violating any of the 39 specific definitions of work. So I'll
Well,
call in.
do rabbis get a secret Shabbat that no one else gets because they have to work on Shabbat?
If we did, I couldn't tell you, so I sorry, can't answer that.
I don't
Cheryl,
know, at my temple, they get Thursday off.
is that what you want to, do you want to add? Okay, Alan.
Well, I decided that I'd like to look at this as a metaphor for the wording isn't the way humans think or anthropomorphically think of the rest, but that the message is about needing to make boundaries and transitions from, let's say, one week to another. So it's a metaphor for that when it says rest, that's a lesson, not, I'm making this up.
Yes. And I'll also just point out that the Bible is very anthropomorphic in dealing with God. So God takes us out of Egypt with a strong hand. God is heard walking around the Garden of Eden. You know, I often point out the Hebrew idiom for God getting angry is God's nose gets red. So the Bible is not shy about being anthropomorphic about God. So and this clearly is from, well, the language is from Exodus, but we know that we get this idea also from Genesis. Cheryl, did you want to add something? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, I wouldn't think of it as like God needing to be refreshed, because there's somewhere in the world or space, that it isn't a Saturday or Shabbat. So I'm sorry, God has to work all the time. I didn't think God needed rest.
Right. And I would agree with that. But I would say one of the central ideas in Judaism is that we imitate God. And the Bible points to specific, or the rabbis point to specific points in the Bible. God makes clothing for Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. So we should make clothing. God visits the sick. God sends angels, messengers to visit Abraham when he's recovering from his circumcision. So therefore we should visit the sick. So this is a continuing theme in Judaism, that what God does, we should be doing also. Bryce.
Yeah, what's really fascinating is what developed in Christianity in the COVID getting over. What Christianity, a large portion of philosophical thinkers about Christianity in the late Renaissance believed that God was turning the crank of the world. You see, and that God was working ceaselessly to make the world go.
Yeah, and we see that in some Jewish liturgy also, who day by day renews the work of creation.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, I think that's as far as I want to get. Yeah, we'll get to the Kedushat Hayom. Yep, there's more Kedushat Hayom that we will get to next time. And so if anyone has any final comments, if not, again, next week we will not be meeting Monday night in observance of Tisha B'Av, and we are meeting both this Wednesday for those of you who come to the Wednesday sessions, and a week from Wednesday.
Do most rabbis fast on that day?
I'm sorry?
Do most rabbis fast on Tisha B'Av?
You'll have to ask the rabbis. I mean, I would say it is traditional to have a 24-hour fast on Tisha B'Av. Many minor fast days, like the fast of Esther, Tzom Gedalia, are daytime fasts. Tisha B'Av is a 24-hour fast. I would say the Reform movement has not paid particular attention to Tisha B'Av, and neither have I.
But to Jerry's question, they're either directed to all the people, not just the rabbis, or it doesn't direct to them, right? As Reform, you're not treating it, you wouldn't be treated differently than I am.
Yeah.
The way Jerry worded the question, I'm just going back.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
you're
actually that's a very important point.
Yes.
Rabbis don't have any
Yeah.
special, I would say, obligations to obey Jewish law or exemptions to disobey Jewish law than do regular folks as a
Well,
general rule.
I was thinking of it in the way that our cantor used to sit down on the floor on the high holidays and Yom Kippur and Kol Nidre and get all the way down. Doing it because the whole congregation could not do it.
Yeah, and I think that's more of a practical matter, that the way, you know, the way, so just to make folks understand what Jerry's talking about, the Grand Aleinu, the prayer Aleinu, really is a high holiday prayer, which was incorporated into the daily service. But in the Grand Aleinu, when we say Anachnu Korim U'Mishtachavim U'Modim, we don't just bow. We actually, on Rosh Hashanah, we actually get down on the floor with our hands stretched out in front of us and our head on the floor. And in most settings, in most congregations, there's just not room to do it. So quite typically, the service leaders will do it, and I'm not sure I've been doing it lately because I might have a little more trouble getting up. Alan.
No, but to this point, even in Reform, in my temple here for years, I don't know if they do it anymore, is when they get to that part in the service, they invite and pause to those people who want to do that to get in the hall, in the aisle.
Oh,
And
that's something I might do in the future.
small number of people want to
so-
adopt that practice, and they do it when the prayer leader is doing it up front. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually, I was going to say, watch for this, Henry, for High Holidays this in Merced. So there I've got an issue. And that is our cantorial soloist in Merced is 80 years old. And I don't think she's going to get down. I'm serious. I mean, I have some trouble. I can do it. But I would not want to put her in the position of being embarrassed by asking folks to get down and then sort of saying, acknowledging that she's not able to do that. So again, my focus is on the feelings of people rather than the nitty-gritty of liturgy. But it's a very good question.
Oh, I have another question, actually.
Yes.
On Tisha B'Av morning service, on the assumption is there any liturgy that is different, because we use some words, I don't remember what they are when we're going through it, but is there anything specific about the morning service on the?
Yeah, in fact, I thought of maybe having a class next Monday on Tisha B'Av. Yes, so you read a book called Eicha.
Oh, right.
Which is Lamentations. There's an entire book. It's actually one of the 5 Megillot, one of the 5 scrolls, and it's Lamentations, and it's at the river, by the river of Babylon we cried, and there's a specific cantillation that cantors chant. Echa. You don't wear tefillin that morning, and you do wear tefillin in the afternoon service, which would be quite jarring to many people, particularly if you're traditionally worshiping 3 times a day. But as a sign of mourning, you don't wear tefillin. One of the interesting customs of Tisha B'Av is you don't greet people, which is harder than you think.
Yeah.
Because you're running into people in the synagogue, in the street, in the hallway. You're not supposed to greet anyone, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other traditions also, which
So I haven't morning experience. I do not have morning services experience with Tisha B'Av, but around here in the places I've been, they have the Erev service on, and we do read from it's Kahillah, right? That's the
no Eicha.
Echa.
I mean, Tehillim is Psalms. Eicha is the Book of Lamentations, and it may not be a traditional evening prayer. It's probably a morning thing.
Lamentations. Okay, so what you're, so whether that's an adaptation of Reform or Liberal, the night one, we tend to have those like we're going to have this Monday.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection of the fact that the next day is probably a work day, and not many people are coming. Although you shouldn't be working, you should be fasting.
Right. Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay. Okay. So thank you all. I'm going to stop. Oh, I should have stopped sharing before. I'm going to stop recording.